The moment I stumbled into Leo, literally spilling half a glass of red wine down his chef's whites, was the exact moment my quiet, predictable life took a nosedive into the unknown. Oh my God, I am so sorry. My words tumbled out in a rush, mirroring the wine soaking into his shirt. He just laughed, a deep, hearty sound that seemed too loud for the muted conversations around us at the community event. Don't worry about it, happens all the time in the kitchen, though usually with sauce, not wine. I couldn't help but smile back, brushing at the stain as if my hands could undo the mess. Let me pay for the cleaning, I insisted, still mortified. Nah, it's on the house. Consider it an unintended promotion for my restaurant's opening next week. His eyes twinkled with a mix of amusement and something else I couldn't quite place. Mark, always the observer, came over with a look of concern that quickly turned into amusement. Making friends, Am? He teased, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Trying not to ruin them, more like, I muttered, but Leo just waved us off, promising a table at his restaurant, on the house, to make up for the mishap. The following weeks blurred into a routine of work, home, and, unexpectedly, frequent visits to Leo's restaurant. Mark didn't seem to mind. He was buried in grading papers and planning lessons. It's good to support local businesses, I'd say, and he'd nod, distracted by his own world of historical dates and student essays. But with each visit, my conversations with Leo deepened. It started with small talk about the day's specials and the weather, evolving into exchanges about our dreams, fears, and the thrill of new beginnings. Leo had traveled the world, collecting recipes and stories, a stark contrast to my never left my hometown life. His spirit was infectious, adventurous, and bold, everything that my life with Mark wasn't. Emma, you should try the new dessert I've been experimenting with, Leo said one evening, his eyes alight with excitement. We were alone in the restaurant, the last customers long gone. Tell me if it's too much. The dessert was exquisite, a perfect balance of flavors, and as we shared it, our conversation turned personal. I never planned to end up here, in this small town, he confessed, his voice low. But sometimes, you find adventures in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected people. I nodded, lost in his words, feeling a connection that both exhilarated and terrified me. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I was missing, a spark that had dimmed in the routine of daily life with Mark. Mark, with his gentle, non-confrontational nature, had never pushed me out of my comfort zone. Our life together was stable and happy, but in that moment, I realized it lacked the adventure and passion I saw in Leo's eyes. The drive home that night was a blur of conflicting emotions. I loved Mark, truly, but Leo had unearthed a part of me I didn't know was longing for release. The thrill of new experiences, the allure of the unknown, it was intoxicating. I slipped into bed next to Mark, watching him in the dim light. His features were soft, peaceful, and I felt a pang of guilt for the turmoil inside me. Everything okay, Em? He mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, just a long day, I whispered back, but as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in ways I never expected. I rushed through the front door, the clock ticking past 10 p.m., my heart pounding not just from the sprint from my car in the driveway, but also from the cocktail of guilt and thrill swirling inside me. Hey, you're home late. Mark's voice floated from the living room, casual, laced with concern but not suspicion. Yeah. The new menu tasting at Leo's ran longer than expected, I replied, peeling off my jacket, avoiding his gaze. Culinary arts are quite the rabbit hole. Mark chuckled, his eyes returning to the stack of essays on his lap. As long as you're enjoying it, just don't forget to eat something other than critique. The lies settled heavy in my stomach, a stark contrast to the lightness I felt just moments before, under the soft glow of streetlights, Leo's lips on mine. It was supposed to be a celebration of his restaurant's glowing review, a simple, innocent night out. Yet, there we were, crossing lines I'd never imagined I'd dare to approach, let alone cross. It was just a kiss, I whispered to my reflection later that night, a feeble attempt to douse the wildfire spreading through my conscience. Harmless fun, an anomaly in an otherwise ordinary life, I convinced myself, ignoring the sinking feeling that it was anything but. The affair, as it unfolded with the reckless abandon of a freefall, became my secret thrill, a parallel life that existed in the shadows of late nights and whispered promises. Leo's apartment, with its eclectic mix of art and spices, became a sanctuary from the predictability of my life with Mark. Working late again, I'd text Mark, hating myself for the ease with which the lies came, for the excitement that bubbled up at the thought of seeing Leo. Comparisons between Mark and Leo became my mind's constant background noise. Mark, with his quiet, steady love, felt like a safe harbor in a storm, always there, always gentle. Yet, standing next to Leo, with his passion for life and unbridled enthusiasm, Mark seemed to fade into the background. I mistook the rush of adrenaline for happiness, the thrill of secrecy for depth of connection. One evening, as I lay in Leo's bed, his arm draped over me, a sense of unease crept in, uninvited and persistent. Was it really compatibility I felt with Leo, or was it just the allure of novelty? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I found myself watching Mark as he made breakfast, humming a tune, the sunlight casting a halo around him. In that mundane, beautiful moment, the reality of what I was risking hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Mark, with all his gentleness, represented a love that was real and enduring, not just an escape from the everyday. But by then, the web of lies I had woven around us was too intricate, too tangled. Stepping back into the kitchen, into the life I had with Mark, felt like stepping into a different world, one where the choices I had made loomed over us, threatening to shatter the quiet, beautiful life we had built together. The moment I saw Mark holding that receipt, the air in our cozy kitchen felt like it dropped 10 degrees. "Emma, what's this? I thought you had a girls' night out last Thursday," he asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a storm of confusion and hurt. I froze, the life forming in my mind feeling like a physical weight on my tongue. "Oh, that? It was just a lunch with some coworkers last week. I must have forgotten to throw it away." My heart pounded against my chest, the guilt gnawing at me, but I wrapped myself in a thin veneer of indignation. "Why are you going through my purse?" Mark's face softened, the lines of stress and doubt smoothing as he took a step back. "I'm sorry, I wasn't snooping, it just fell out when I moved your purse to clean the counter." He sounded almost apologetic, wanting to believe me, his trust in our love momentarily overshadowing the glaring red flags. I watched as he brushed off his suspicions, attributing them to the overwhelming stress from his recent project at work. "You're right, I'm sorry. I've just been on edge with everything going on at school," he admitted, pulling me into a hug that felt like a band-aid over a gaping wound. The relief that washed over me was tinged with a deep, aching sadness. Mark's willingness to trust me, despite his instincts telling him otherwise, felt like a betrayal of its own. I had crossed a line from which there was no easy return, and the weight of my choices pressed down on me with every beat of my heart. My carelessness grew as the affair clouded my judgment, a slip that would eventually bring everything crashing down. One evening, after another secret rendezvous with Leo, I came home to find Mark sitting in the dark, my phone in his hand. The light from the screen cast shadows across his face, highlighting a look of devastation that I had never seen before. "Emma, who is Leo?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. The message on the screen, a casual arrangement for our next meetup, lay between us like the final piece of evidence in a trial. The walls I had built, the lies I had told, crumbled around me. Caught off guard, with nowhere left to hide, I confessed to the affair, my words stumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to downplay its seriousness. "It was nothing, just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything, Mark, I swear." But the damage was done. The hurt in Mark's eyes was a reflection of the chaos I had caused, a stark reminder of the love and trust one had so recklessly gambled away. The confession, far from a relief, felt like stepping out from one storm into another, this one of my own making. As Mark stood up, the distance between us felt like a chasm too wide to cross. "I need some time," he said, his voice breaking, the words hanging heavy between us as he walked away, leaving me to grapple with the reality of the pain I had inflicted on the heart of the person who had loved me most. The words left my mouth before I could reel them back in, a bold declaration in the silence of our living room. "I want both of you in my life," I said, watching Mark closely, trying to gauge his reaction. His face was a mask of unreadable calm, the kind that precedes a storm. He didn't say a word, just looked at me with a depth I couldn't decipher, and it chilled me more than any argument could have. Mark's silence was the first crack in my misguided confidence. He moved to the guest room that night, a physical manifestation of the chasm that had opened between us. It was a quiet rebellion, his way of drawing a line I never thought he would. I told myself I was okay with it, that this distance was just a temporary hiccup, but watching him retreat into a world of work and silence, avoiding any and all confrontation, was unnerving. I continued seeing Leo, buoyed by a false sense of control over my life and the situation. The thrill of the affair, once intoxicating, now felt tinged with the reality of my crumbling marriage. Yet, I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself that I could maintain this balance, that Mark's gentle nature meant he would never truly walk away. But as days turned into weeks, the shift in Mark became impossible to ignore. Gone was the warmth that had always greeted me, replaced by a cold efficiency that felt like a stranger living in our house. He moved through his daily routines with a detachment that was more piercing than any words of anger could have been. A part of me ached to bridge the gap, to return to the familiarity of our life before, but pride and stubbornness held me back. The realization that I missed the man he used to be came with a pang of regret, a twinge that I quickly shook off, burying it under layers of justification for my actions. It was easier to ignore the growing pit in my stomach than to confront the truth of what I was doing to us both. Meanwhile, Mark's silence wasn't passive as I had assumed, it was strategic. He began documenting everything, receipts, messages, times I came home late without explanation. His actions were quiet but deliberate, a meticulous gathering of evidence that I was blissfully unaware of. Mark, the man I had married for his gentleness and aversion to conflict, was planning his next steps with a precision that was as surprising as it was terrifying. Emboldened by my belief in his inability to confront me, my liaisons with Leo became more frequent, more daring. The thrill of the forbidden, which had dulled over time, found new life under the illusion of my invincibility. I ignored the nagging voice in the back of my mind warning me of the consequences, convinced that Mark's love would keep him tethered to me, no matter what. But the house felt emptier with each passing day, the silences longer, the glances colder. The man I thought I knew, the one I believed would never take decisive action, was slowly fading away, replaced by someone who was planning his escape from the chaos I had created. And as the evidence mounted, so did the realization that I had underestimated Mark, mistaking his kindness for weakness, his silence for submission. In my pursuit of excitement, of something more, I had failed to see the strength in Mark's restraint, the depth of his pain in every carefully documented proof of my betrayal. The reality of my actions and the impending consequences loomed over me, a shadow I could no longer outrun. The morning I caught Mark on the phone in the study, his voice a hushed murmur behind closed doors, my heart sank. I knew, without knowing how I knew, that the delicate house of cards my life had become was about to collapse. "Yes, I have all the necessary evidence," he said, a sentence that froze me in my tracks. It was clear then, Mark was seeing a lawyer, preparing to end our marriage with as much dignity and preparation as he could muster. I should have been panicked, remorseful, or scared, but instead, a numb resolve settled over me. I had a weekend getaway planned with Leo, a brief escape from the tangled web I had woven. "It's a work conference, out of town," I lied smoothly, watching Mark's face for any sign of the storm I knew must be brewing inside him. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, a master at hiding the hurt I knew I was causing. The weekend was a blur of laughter, wine, and carefree moments, a stark contrast to the reality waiting for me at home. Lost in the bubble of my affair, I posted pictures on social media without a second thought, not considering the mutual friends who might see and question Mark. It was a mistake that volumes of my recklessness. Unbeknownst to me, Mark, through the help of a friend, managed to secure photographs of Leo and me together during that weekend. It was evidence that added to the silent case he was building against me, a case I was oblivious to as I continued to weave lies and half-truths. Returning home, I found Mark in the same calm state I had left him. His demeanor was unsettling, not the confrontation I had braced myself for, but something far more disquieting. "How was the conference?" he asked, his voice steady, eyes locking onto mine as I spun tales of sessions attended and networking done, stories as hollow as the feeling in my chest. His calmness was a facade, a controlled exterior that masked the decisive actions he was taking behind the scenes. As I recounted the fabricated details of my trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was seeing right through me, his silence not a sign of acceptance, but of a man who had already moved beyond the chaos I had caused. The realization that my actions were about to have real, irrevocable consequences hit me then, a belated and bitter acknowledgement of the damage I had inflicted not just on our marriage, but on the man I had once promised to love and cherish. Mark's question about my trip wasn't a simple inquiry, it was a farewell to the life we had built, a life I had taken for granted until it was too late. The knock on the door was sharp, unexpected. I was alone, the house around me echoing with the kind of silence that only comes when life as you know it is about to change. I opened the door to a man I didn't recognize, holding an envelope. "Emma?" he asked, and upon my nod, he handed it to me. "You've been served." The words, so commonly thrown around in TV dramas, felt surreal, hitting me with a force I hadn't anticipated. Divorce papers. From Mark. As I flipped through the documents, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Irreconcilable differences, evidence of infidelity. The words leapt off the page, each one a hammer blow to the facade of control I thought I had. Mark, my gentle, non-confrontational Mark, had taken the step I never believed he would. The shock left me reeling, a mix of disbelief and a deep, gnawing panic setting in. I confronted him that evening, papers in hand, my voice shaky but insistent. "We can work this out, Mark. It's too much. Let's talk about it," I pleaded, the desperation clear in my voice. But the man who stood before me was not the Mark one knew. He was resolute, a firmness in his eyes I had never seen. "There's nothing left to discuss, Emma. I've made my decision." His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of finality that told me this was not a negotiation, it was a goodbye. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal terms and cold, hard facts. Mark had documented everything meticulously, from the late nights I couldn't explain to the financial mismanagement that had gone on under my watch. The evidence of public indiscretion, photos, and social media posts painted a picture I couldn't deny. It was all there, black on white, a narrative of betrayal that I had authored myself. But the real blow came when I learned Mark was claiming the house. Citing negligence and betrayal, the lawyer's words echoed in my head, a mantra of loss and consequence. The house we had chosen together, imagining a future that would now never be, had become another casualty of my actions. Sitting in the now too quiet living room, the divorce papers spread out before me, a profound sense of loss washed over me. It wasn't just Mark one was losing, it was the life we had built, the future we had dreamed of. I had underestimated Mark's resolve, mistaking his kindness for weakness, his patience for passivity. In doing so, I had lost not just his trust, but everything we had together. The realization hit me hard, the extent of Mark's preparations a testament to how deeply I had hurt him, how irrevocably I had shattered the trust and love he had once had for me. As the reality of my actions and their consequences settled in, the full weight of what I had done and what I was about to lose became painfully, undeniably clear. The knock on my door was so soft, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But when I opened it to find a somber-faced man holding a stack of papers, my heart plummeted. "Emma?" he asked, a rhetorical question as his eyes flicked to the document in his hand. I'm here to serve you these divorce papers, filed by Mark. The words hit me like a physical blow, the urgency of my unraveling life suddenly crystallizing in the chill morning air. I'd underestimated Mark, thinking his gentle nature equated to weakness, that he would never take such a drastic step. But as I flipped through the pages, seeing the words, irreconcilable differences, and evidence of infidelity, the reality of my situation sank in. Mark was serious, and he was leaving no room for negotiation. In a daze, I tried to talk to him, to explain, to negotiate, anything to reverse the course of the tidal wave I'd set in motion. But Mark, once the epitome of patience and understanding, had turned into a stranger, his resolve as firm as the evidence he'd meticulously gathered against me. The divorce proceedings were a blur, each session revealing the depth of Mark's preparation. He had documented everything: financial mismanagement on my part, public indiscretions, and, most damningly, the affair with Leo. It was a thorough dismantling of the life we'd built together, piece by piece, leaving me exposed and vulnerable in the eyes of the court. The final blow came when I learned that Mark was claiming the house, citing my negligence and betrayal as the primary reasons. The judge sided with him, granting him not only the house but also a significant portion of our shared assets. The legal system, it seemed, had little sympathy for my plight, viewing my actions through the lens of deceit rather than the complex web of emotions that had led me there. Leo, who I had foolishly thought might offer some solace, became another casualty of my choices. The legal drama and public scandal were too much for him, and he ended our relationship, leaving me more isolated than I'd ever been. The reality of my situation was stark. Divorced, living in a small apartment, a shadow of the life I once commanded with such carelessness. In the silence of my new reality, reflection became my only companion. The full weight of what I had lost, the depth of the pain I had caused, settled around me like a shroud. I understood too late the value of what I had with Mark, the love and stability I'd traded for fleeting excitement. Mark, for his part, found solace in the support of friends and family, focusing on rebuilding his life from the ashes of our marriage. His resilience, in the face of such betrayal, was a testament to the strength of his character, a strength I'd failed to see when we were together. In a moment of desperation, I reached out, hoping for forgiveness, for a chance to explain the inexplicable. But Mark refused to see me, his decision a clear message that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The finality of his refusal was a painful reminder of the consequences of my actions, a lesson learned too late in the high cost of taking for granted the love and trust of someone who had— Damn, that new neighbor is hot. I mean, the kind of hot that makes you want to suddenly take up jogging or power washing the driveway. Muscles flexing under that ratty old t-shirt, a drop of sweat running down his neck. Sorry, focus. I just casually mentioned to Mark, hey, the new neighbor's kinda cute. He grunts at his phone and I swear, if it were surgically attached to his hand, it would be less annoying. The next day, Mr. Muscles waves as I'm walking the dog. Hey there, his voice is rough and low. Kinda sexy. I give him a little extra smile, nothing crazy, just a bit flirty. He trips over his own feet, and a blush spreads across his face. Yeah, definitely cute. Sure, I probably shouldn't be thinking about the hot neighbor when I've got a perfectly good husband snoring beside me, but Mark's been buried in his laptop most nights, barely talking to me. He comes to bed late, phone buzzing with some mystery message, and then just rolls over. Something about it all itches at me. So yeah, maybe I find myself, accidentally, heading out to water the flowers at the exact same time Mr. Muscles, Josh, I think his name is tending his garden. And yeah, maybe my daydreams have started starring a certain chiseled neighbor instead of that spreadsheet Mark always talks about. Harmless, right? Just a little fantasy to get me through these boring days. But then last night, that late night buzz. Mark glances at his phone, frowns, and shoves it into his pocket. As he turns away, I catch the screen for a split second, a woman's name I don't recognize. A jolt of something ugly twists in my gut. Maybe I need a little less fantasy and a lot more spying on my suddenly suspicious husband. The cookies were a stroke of genius. One batch, and now I have a legitimate reason to drop by Josh's place. He welcomes me in with that easy smile that makes my knees a little weak. We sit at his kitchen table, lemonade sweating in the afternoon sun, and just talk. Turns out, he's not just a pretty face. He's funny, a little self-deprecating, and actually asks about me, not just rattling on about himself. It's a novelty compared to the grunts and distracted murmurs I get at home. Soon enough, a quick cookie drop-off turns into an hour-long chat, then two. I linger, finding any excuse to stretch out my visits. He never seems to mind, and his attention feels like a warm spotlight, chasing away the shadows that have crept into my life with Mark. Speaking of Mark, things at home are getting weirder. He's coming home earlier, all smiles and that nervous energy of someone with a secret. And instead of his usual frozen dinners, the kitchen smells like Thai or Indian, food I've never seen him order before. Did I suddenly marry a foodie without realizing it? Then there's the perfume. One night I catch it on his shirt, sweet and floral, definitely not something I wear. My stomach churns. It would be too ridiculous, too cliché. Mark wouldn't cheat, would he? The more I think about it, the more Josh starts to seem like a refuge. His place is bright and airy, his smile genuine. With him, I forget all the messy questions circling inside me. Until that one afternoon when he's refilling my lemonade and his hand brushes mine. Just for a second, but the warmth of it lingers on my skin. I should pull away, I know I should, but I find myself leaning just the slightest bit closer. He must notice, because his eyes flicker to mine. The air thickens. Am I seriously considering this? Is flirting with the hot neighbor my twisted way of getting back at Mark? Or is there something real here, a dangerous spark I can't seem to extinguish? The garden shears slip from my hand. Not an accident. I've been planning this clumsy moment for days. Josh catches me with a laugh, his hand firm on my waist. Steady there, he says, and something in his voice ignites a warm flow in my belly. It's wrong, so wrong, but I can't seem to make myself move. Later that evening, he knocks on my back door with a bottle of wine. Thought you might need company, he says, that familiar smile playing on his lips. I shouldn't, but I let him in. One glass turns into two, and soon all the doubts and fears have been drowning come bubbling to the surface. I spill everything. The perfume on Mark's clothes, the late night messages, the coldness that's settled into our house. Josh listens, his eyebrows drawing together. There's sympathy in his eyes, but I notice it's mixed with something else, a dark glint. I should stop talking, but the words keep tumbling out, fueled by the wine and an overwhelming sense of desperation. Before I know it, his hand is on my knee, a soft squeeze. His touch doesn't feel predatory, more comforting. My skin buzzes, a dangerous mixture of guilt and a longing I've tried so long to ignore. I don't pull away. He doesn't deserve you, Josh murmurs. It's so cliché, yet my traitorous heart skips a beat. He stands, pulling me up with him. The room spins, and for a terrifying, exhilarating second, I think I know what comes next. Josh steps closer, his eyes searching mine. Panic and desire twist a knot in my stomach. This is insane. I have a husband, even if he's whatever he is now. But as Josh leans in, a soft brush of breath against my cheek, it feels more like falling than a choice. Then it happens. The kiss. It's not slow and sweet. It's desperate, hungry, erasing everything but the feel of his lips on mine. I gasp, breaking away. I can't, I whisper, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my pulse. A mix of disgust and a strange thrill wash over me. I did this. I crossed a line I can never uncross. My skin burns everywhere Josh touched me. Shame crashes over me in waves, followed by flashes of that addictive, illicit thrill. I try to scrub the memory away in a scalding shower, but I can't escape his scent, a heady mix of crisp laundry and something warm, so distinctly him. Sleep is impossible. I lie awake next to Mark, his snores a grating soundtrack to my racing thoughts. I hate him, no, I hate myself. No, I don't know what I feel anymore. All I know is that I crave another taste of Josh, a hit of that fleeting, dangerous happiness. And Mark? He's acting weird, more affectionate, like a puppy that's been caught chewing up the expensive shoes. Did he sense something? Guilt makes a mockery of the sweet gestures, the omelets he suddenly knows how to make. My own guilt is a hungry beast twisting in my gut, but I push it down. I deserve a little happiness, I tell myself, even if it all comes wrapped in lies. Josh is on my mind 24/7. I text him whenever I find a safe moment, flirty little messages, double entendres. We engineer, accidental, meetings at the park, at the grocery store, his hand brushing mine as we both reach for the same head of lettuce. It's a game now, both terrifying and intoxicating. Then one afternoon my phone vibrates. Kid spending the night at his mom's. My place. My pulse rockets. This is it, the line I swore I wouldn't cross. The invitation hangs in the air, a tantalizing dare. My hands shake as I type, yes. That night, as Mark works late, I slip out. The drive to Josh's house is a blur. Guilt and anticipation churn in my stomach. When he opens the door, desire wins. The guilt can come in the morning. The drive to Josh's is one big knot in my stomach. Fear and longing war inside me. What the hell am I doing? But the closer I get, the more a reckless excitement takes over, pushing aside the rational voice whispering warnings. Josh opens the door and I'm lost. The kiss isn't hesitant this time, it's demanding, desperate. In a whirlwind, he's ushering me inside, and hesitation shatters. Clothes fly off. Hands grasp, roam, claim. The act itself is a blur of stolen moments and hushed moans. Right and wrong tangle on my tongue, impossible to separate. Afterwards, my limbs feel heavy, my insides a strange mix of buzzing nerves and a leaden dread. Yet, even as the shame starts creeping back, there's a flicker of something else, power. I crossed a line, shattered everything I thought I knew about myself, and the intoxicating thrill of it sits dangerously close to the guilt. Girls' night, I lie to Mark later, the words barely recognizable as my own. He doesn't question it, and that, more than anything, fuels the fury simmering beneath my skin. My lies become a weapon, a way to strike back against the ghost of his own potential betrayals. Josh and I fall into a pattern, chance. Encounters morph into planned rendezvous filled with breathless whispers and stolen touches. I spin elaborate tales for Mark, spa days, book clubs, anything to justify my absences. Each lie sharpens the thrill of the affair, feeding that dangerous sense of control. I become a different person. I'm reckless, tossing caution to the wind. I meet Josh during Mark's lunch break, make flimsy excuses to leave work early. Fear is a constant companion, yet the rush that comes with outsmarting everyone, Mark, my friends, perhaps even myself, is addictive. It's a fire in my blood, and I'm terrified of it burning me to the ground. My hands tremble as I scroll through Mark's texts. The name, Sarah, leaps out, a series of flirty exchanges, suggestive emojis. My rage burns away the last flicker of guilt over Josh. If Mark gets to have a secret life, then damn it, so do I. A twisted sort of logic takes over. Revenge feels like the only thing to quell the fury in my veins. I won't be some sad, betrayed wife. I'll show Mark what it's like to be played for a fool. I become a woman obsessed, a chillingly focused hunter weaving a web of deceit. My next tryst with Josh isn't just about the physical release. I start dropping hints, carefully placed barbs disguised as idle complaints. Mark's so distant lately, his usual easy smile falters, replaced by a guarded look. Perfect. He knows something, he has to. It gives me a strange sense of satisfaction, twisting the power dynamic between us. Then, the real play. Have you ever met a woman named Sarah? I ask Josh, nonchalantly. His face goes pale, the blood draining away. Bingo. So, he knows about Mark's mistress. He knows he's helping me cheat on a cheating husband. His complicity fuels a dark thrill, a giddy sense of danger. But there's more to this. I can feel it. I arrange a chance encounter with Sarah at a coffee shop. She's not the confident vixen I expected. She's edgy, insecure. She confesses, Mark made me feel special at first. Now I feel disgusting. A twisted form of solidarity crackles between us, victims of the same manipulations. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, the saying goes. And in the warped reality I've created, Sarah could be a weapon. An idea flickers in my mind, as insane as it is exhilarating, a path to turn Mark's betrayals against him, using the very weapons he provided me with. Mark's clumsy excuses are transparent now. He stumbles over his words, leaves his phone unlocked like he's daring me to go through it again. I don't need to. Sarah's confession burns a path of destruction in my mind, a testament to his betrayal. Each stumble of his, every panicked glance, brings me a twisted sense of grim satisfaction. He deserves to feel the pain he's inflicted on me. Confronting Josh is strangely terrifying. It's a battle of wills, him trying to squirm out of the trap, me threatening to expose his complicity in the affair. When I finally say, Sarah, and watch the color drain from his face, my power over him is intoxicating and repulsive all at once. He's scared, but there's a flicker of something else in his eyes. Intrigue, maybe? A hint that he might enjoy watching Mark suffer as much as I do. It makes my skin crawl, yet I need him. With Sarah's reluctant help, we set the trap. It's pathetically easy. One carefully orchestrated, accidental run-in at the grocery store where Mark and Sarah are too engrossed in each other to notice their audience, and the proof is undeniable. The confrontation with Mark is a blur. I throw the evidence at him. The texts, the earring I miraculously found, Sarah's tearful words. Mark crumbles, his shallow excuses shattering. The fury pouring out of me surprises even myself. Every venomous word feels like a release, even as it leaves a hollow ache. The victory, when it comes, tastes like ashes. Sarah's tear-streaked face, the pathetic figure of Mark hunched over. It's not the triumphant expose I expected. Instead, a chilling thought creeps into my mind. Am I the monster here? I've manipulated, lied, and destroyed my own life to exact a vicious revenge. Josh wants nothing to do with me after this. He ghosts me entirely, and I can barely blame him. The sight of my own twisted reflection makes me want to crawl out of my skin. Mark and I exist in a miserable limbo. Neither of us wants to be here, yet neither of us can find the strength to leave. My home feels like a tomb, a monument to the wreckage I've single-handedly caused. The divorce lawyer's office is sterile, fluorescent lights glinting off the gold lettering on his door. It feels like the most fitting setting for the official death of my marriage. Therapy is a different kind of torture, dissecting my choices, digging through the ashes of who I once was. Each session leaves me raw, more confused than when I started. Dinner with Mark is an excruciating exercise in silence. Words hover in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. It's tempting to scream, to blame, but what's the point? I'm as guilty as he is. The space where a happy couple should be is a void, and we both seem content to stay trapped within it. Whispers follow me everywhere. The grocery store clerk's too bright smile. The pity in the eyes of old friends. They feel like tiny needles pricking at my skin. I've become that woman, the one you gossip about over coffee, a cautionary tale about the dangers of revenge and how quickly a perfect life can crumble. And then, an unexpected lifeline. A text from Sarah. No accusations, no pity. Just a simple question. Coffee? It's a gamble. Meeting up, but a desperate ache for connection pushes me out the door. We sit across from each other, two damaged souls caught in the undertow of the same storm. Bitterness lingers, but beneath it, a strange bond flickers. We are victims of the same betrayal, scarred in different but equally deep ways. Sarah becomes a twisted sort of friend, a confidant born of the absolute worst circumstances. We meet in out-of-the-way cafes, sharing our struggles, our anger, and a sliver of hope that we might rebuild something from the ruins. One gray, rainy morning, there's a knock at my door. It's Josh. He looks terrible, gaunt, eyes filled with self-loathing. The apologies stumble out of him, awkward and genuine. Not for the affair itself, but for enabling it, for not being a better friend when I needed it most. He's a mess, but I see a flicker of the man I once found attractive. There's not going to be a fairy tale ending here. No miraculous reconciliation with Mark, no passionate reunion with Josh. The path ahead is a blur of uncertainty, paved with broken pieces and difficult, honest conversations. But perhaps somewhere down that uncertain road, there might be forgiveness for Mark, for Josh, but most importantly, for myself. 2 years, and I'm still learning to live with ghosts. Some nights I jolt awake to the phantom scent of Sarah's perfume. Other times a stranger's nervous tick makes my skin crawl with the echo of Mark's guilt. My shattered life has been hastily glued back together, the cracks still visible in the warped reflections. Sarah is a lifeline, but a tangled one. We share coffee, laughter, and sometimes a comfortable silence. But there are unspoken shadows between us. The memory of Mark, the what-ifs of a friendship that might have been if not for the wreckage we both created. Work is my safe space. Deadlines, emails, the mundane rhythm of office life. It's a balm against the messy emotions constantly threatening to bubble up. Productivity is my shield, but it can't protect me forever. The therapist's couch is where I confront the twisted mess I've become, the lingering fury, the self-destruction disguised as revenge. It's an ugly process, but with each hesitant confession, a tiny sliver of the weight on my soul seems to lift. A stranger has moved into the house next door. He offers a friendly wave as I wrestle with overflowing recycling bins, a hesitant smile as I struggle with the lawnmower. He's normal, safe, everything that my life hasn't been in years. Yet, the spark of attraction that flutters in my stomach feels like a betrayal of every terrible thing I've endured. And then, an invitation, coffee sometime? My heart thuds a painful rhythm, a stark reminder of the last time a simple question like that turned my world upside down. There's fear there, the ever-present ghost of Josh whispering warnings. Yet, amidst it all, there's a flicker of curiosity, of hope, however fragile. The past can't be erased, and I'm scarred in ways that may never truly heal. But perhaps there's space in this new chapter for simple kindness, tentative smiles, and the possibility of a future not built on the ashes of the past, but something altogether different. Coffee with him is safe. Conversation flows without the dangerous currents that swirled around Josh. We talk about books, silly pet stories, the ordinary things that feel extraordinary after years of walking on eggshells. Dinner follows, then shared walks on crisp autumn evenings, my dog sniffing out a tentative friendship with his gentle golden retriever. There's a comforting kind of slowness to it, and the anxieties that live in my chest quiet down just a little in his company. His name is David. He works as an accountant, loves bad sci-fi movies, and makes a surprisingly good omelet. More importantly, he doesn't pry into my past, doesn't push for details I'm not ready to give. His presence is a balm, the normalcy I never realized I craved so desperately. One rainy night, fueled by wine and a flicker of courage, I tell him. Not everything, not the darkest parts, but enough. About Mark, the lies, the affair that consumed me. I expect to see judgment in his eyes, a flicker of fear. Instead, I find only understanding and a quiet sort of support. Confessing to Sarah feels riskier. But when I do, she surprises me. Good, she says with a wry smile. It's about damn time you found a bit of happiness. There's still a distance between us. Always will be. Yet, I feel a sliver of gratitude for this unexpected, flawed sisterhood we've stumbled into. Sometimes I see Josh around town. He seems smaller, the swagger I once found attractive replaced by a hunched posture of defeat. Our gazes skitters away, the unspoken pain of what happened hanging heavily in the space between us. There's no forgiveness there, and perhaps there never will be, but there's acceptance. With David, things are different. They're tentative, built on the fragile foundation of shared vulnerability and a desperate need for something good. There are still nights I wake up in a cold sweat, expecting betrayal. Yet, there are more nights when I sleep soundly, his simple snoring beside me a testament to the calm I'm slowly learning to cultivate. It's not perfect, it never will be. There won't be a fairy tale ending. The scars I carry will always be a part of me, a reminder of the destruction I wrought, and the hard-earned lessons along the path back toward the light. But there's a simple sort of peace in accepting the messiness, the imperfections, and the knowledge that I'm finally creating a life that is mine, not one defined by the worst. The lights of Vegas were blinding, or maybe that was just the 6 cocktails I downed since the reception started. My husband, glued to his phone, barely noticed me all evening. It's a big deal, babe. Gotta close this, he'd muttered, his eyes never leaving the screen. So, there I was, drowning in a sea of strangers, feeling more alone than ever. That's when I met Alex. He had this easy charm, a smile that felt like it was just for me. We talked, laughed, and danced. It was exhilarating, feeling wanted again. I let myself be swept away in the moment, forgetting the ring on my finger, the husband who might as well have been 1,000 miles away. The night blurred into a cascade of bad decisions. I ended up in Alex's hotel room, the city's neon lights casting shadows across us. It was a moment of madness, a desperate grab at feeling something, anything. When I woke up the next morning, the weight of what I'd done hit me like a freight train. I slipped out before Alex woke up, my heart pounding with guilt. I tried to act normal after that, but the guilt gnawed at me with every smile my husband gave me, every, "I love you," he said. I felt like a fraud. The secret ate away at me, a constant reminder of the line I'd crossed. 2 weeks later, the consequences became more than just emotional. Symptoms I couldn't ignore sent me to the doctor, and then came the diagnosis that felt like a death sentence. An STD. My world crumbled. How was I going to explain this? I couldn't. I started treatment in secret, every doctor's visit a clandestine operation. The fear of my husband finding out was a shadow that followed me everywhere. I was trapped in a web of my own making, every thread a lie, every movement precarious. The vibrant lights of Vegas seemed a world away, a stark contrast to the darkness I felt enveloping me. My husband, still oblivious, continued to bury himself in work, unaware of the storm brewing in his own home. And I, too scared to face the consequences of my actions, kept silent, hoping against hope that this secret would somehow disappear. But deep down I knew. Secrets have a way of coming out, and mine was a ticking time bomb, ready to destroy everything I held dear. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. It was like the universe had a twisted sense of humor, throwing me into a pit of quicksand. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. My phone buzzed with a message that made my heart stop. It was from Jenna, my ex-girlfriend who'd been at the wedding, too. "Saw you weren't yourself that night. Everything okay?" It read, but the underlying tone screamed, "I know what you did." I tried to play it cool, typing back a vague, "Yeah, just too much to drink. You know how it gets." But Jenna wasn't buying it. She replied with something that turned my blood cold. "Got some interesting videos from the wedding. You sure looked like you were having fun." My stomach dropped. "Videos? How? Why?" I couldn't let this hang over me. So, I did what I thought I had to. I met with Jenna. Seeing her again brought back a mix of emotions, but fear was the frontrunner. "Please, Jenna, tell me you don't have what I think you have," I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. She just looked at me, an unreadable expression on her face, before sliding her phone across the table. The video was unmistakable. There I was, with Alex, in a way no married woman should ever be caught. The price for her silence? More money than I'd like to admit. Handing it over felt like I was signing a pact with the devil, but what choice did I have? Every beep of my phone, every glance from my husband, felt like a countdown to my world exploding. And explode it did, but not in the way I expected. My husband, the tech wizard, noticed the unusual bank withdrawals. "Hey, babe, our account's looking a little funny. You know anything about that?" His casual tone belied the sharpness in his eyes. I brushed it off with a lie about unexpected expenses, but the seed of doubt was planted. The constant fear of Jenna releasing the video, combined with my husband's growing suspicion, was a cocktail of stress I couldn't digest. I was living on the edge, every day a step closer to the precipice. My husband's behavior changed. He became more observant, his questions more pointed. I noticed him spending more time on his computer, his brows furrowed in concentration. I knew he was digging, and it was only a matter of time before he hit the dirt. Every moment was tinged with the anticipation of disaster. My husband, once oblivious, now watched me with a hawk's eye, piecing together the puzzle of my lies. The tension in our home was palpable, a thick fog of unsaid accusations and unasked questions. I was trapped in a web of my own making, every thread a lie that bound me tighter. The fear of being found out was a constant shadow, darkening every moment of supposed happiness. The truth was a ticking bomb, and I was waiting for it to detonate. The day started with a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake off. My husband had been quieter than usual, his glances more piercing. I chalked it up to my guilty conscience, but deep down, I knew the storm was brewing. Then, I noticed the new security cameras installed around our home. Just a precaution, he said, but his eyes told a different story. My world was teetering on the edge, and I was desperately clinging to the facade of normalcy. But it all came crashing down when my husband confronted me one evening, his face a mask of calm that belied the storm raging inside. Had an interesting chat with Jenna today, he began, and my heart stopped. How? When? The questions spiraled in my mind, but I remained silent, frozen. He laid the evidence before me, videos and pictures that painted a vivid picture of my betrayal. It felt like watching the premiere of my nightmare, with my husband as the unwilling audience. How could you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through me sharper than any scream. I had no words, just tears and a plea for forgiveness that sounded hollow even to my own ears. I'm sorry. I was lost. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, I sobbed, the truth pouring out in a torrent of regret. But apologies couldn't undo the hurt, couldn't erase the images that now burned in his memory. He listened, or at least, he pretended to, his face an unreadable mask. When I finished, the silence between us was deafening. Then, without a word, he walked away, the finality in his steps echoing louder than any goodbye. The days that followed were a blur. I reached out, tried to explain, to make him see it was a mistake, that I was still the woman he married. But it was like talking to a ghost. He was there, but not really. His decision was made, and soon, so was his move. Boxes packed, bags zipped up, and with one last look that didn't quite meet my eyes, he was gone. Left in the echoing silence of our home, I was forced to confront the reality of what I'd done. The walls that once held laughter and love now stood as silent witnesses to my downfall. I had thought I could keep it a secret, that my transgressions would fade away with time. But the truth has a way of clawing its way out, leaving destruction in its wake. His departure marked the end of our life together, a chapter closed with a silence that was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I was left to pick up the pieces of the life I'd shattered, each fragment a reminder of the love I'd betrayed. The loneliness was a constant companion, a shadow that followed me through the empty rooms, a reminder of the cost of my actions. In the aftermath, I realized the gravity of what I'd lost. It wasn't just my husband, but the trust we'd built, the future we'd dreamed of. All gone, because of a moment's folly, because of a choice I made. The weight of my decisions bore down on me, a heavy cloak of guilt and regret I'd wear for the rest of my days. The lesson was a harsh one, learned in the cruelest of ways. Trust, once broken, was not easily mended, and some mistakes carried consequences that echoed far beyond the moment of their making. I was left alone, the architect of my own misery, a stark reminder of the price of betrayal. In the aftermath of my world imploding, reaching out to him felt like trying to bridge an ever-widening chasm with nothing but frayed ropes of hope. But every attempt to connect, to explain, to apologize, was met with the digital equivalent of a slammed door. Blocked. On every app, every platform. It was as if he was erasing me from his life, one click at a time. The silence from his end was deafening, but the noise from everywhere else was overwhelming. Whispers turned into rumors, rumors into glaring headlines in the tabloid of our social circle. My name, once spoken with affection or respect, was now tinged with disdain and judgment. Did you hear what she did? They didn't need to say my name. Everyone knew who she was. The messages started pouring in. Some were veiled in concern, but most were naked in their hostility. How could you? I thought I knew you. Every word was a dagger, and I was bleeding out, unable to defend myself against the onslaught. Friends I'd laughed with, shared secrets with, turned their backs, their silhouettes joining the growing crowd of my accusers. Work became a minefield. I could feel the eyes on me, heavy with unasked questions and unsaid accusations. My desk, once a place of productivity and pride, felt like a pillory. I could almost hear the whispers, feel the judgment pressing down on me. That's her. Can you believe it? My career, once on an upward trajectory, was now spiraling, caught in the gravity of my personal failings. When the divorce papers arrived, it felt like a formality. A rubber stamp on the end of my marriage, of the life I'd known. Infidelity cited in black and white, a scarlet letter I'd wear in the court of public opinion. My lawyer, a woman with kind eyes that didn't quite reach the rest of her face, tried her best to prepare me. It's not looking good, she'd said, a master of understatement. The evidence was damning, and my pleas for understanding, for leniency, fell on deaf ears. The proceedings were a blur, a swift and merciless cutting of ties. He was there, looking right through me as if I was already a ghost in his past. The judge's voice was distant, the words barely registering until the final decree was pronounced. Divorce. Just like that, it was over. He got everything he wanted, and why wouldn't he? The evidence was irrefutable, my mistakes undeniable. I left the courtroom feeling hollow. The finality of it all was a weight, dragging me down into a reality I still couldn't fully grasp. I was no longer a wife, no longer part of the us I'd clung to, even as it slipped through my fingers. The future, once shared, was now a path I had to walk alone, every step reminding me of what I'd lost. The drive home was automatic, the streets familiar yet foreign, as if I was seeing them through the veil of my new reality. The house, once filled with laughter and love, was just a building now, its walls echoing with the remnants of a life that was no longer mine. Sitting in the silence, I realized the full extent of what my actions had cost me. Not just my marriage, but my place in the world. My reputation, my friendships, my career, everything was tainted, damaged beyond repair. The divorce might have been the legal end of my marriage, but the consequences of my betrayal were just beginning to unfold. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried before the reality of my new life began to set in. Money, once a shared resource in our marriage, was now a source of constant anxiety. The divorce settlement had left me with little, and the blackmail payments to Jenna had drained what little reserves I had left. It felt like I was paying the price for my actions, not just emotionally, but literally. Moving out of the home I had shared with my husband was a sobering experience. I traded our spacious, warm house for a cramped, cold apartment on the outskirts of town. The walls were thin, the neighbors noisy, and the sense of isolation palpable. It was a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen, of the gap between the life I once had and the one I was now forced to navigate. The STD diagnosis added a layer of complexity to my already complicated situation. It was a permanent mark of my indiscretion, a scar I would carry with me. The shame was sometimes too much to bear, a constant reminder of that one night and its irreversible consequences. I tried to pick up the pieces, to build something resembling a normal life. But the shame of what I had done followed me like a shadow. Friends I once confided in had turned their backs on me, and my professional life was in tatters. Starting over was harder than I had imagined. The world seemed to have moved on without me, leaving me behind with my mistakes. Meanwhile, my husband seemed to flourish in the aftermath of our divorce. Pictures of him smiling and laughing with friends started appearing on social media, a stark contrast to the lonely existence I now led. Seeing him so happy, so unburdened by the past we shared, was a painful reminder of what I had lost. The life we had built together was now just a memory, one that he seemed all too eager to forget. The loneliness was suffocating. In a desperate attempt to fill the void, I tried dating again. But my heart wasn't in it. Trust, once given so freely, was now a commodity I couldn't afford. My past was a barrier, a wall that kept me from connecting with anyone new. The fear of being judged, of having my secrets exposed all over again, made it impossible to open up. Relationships, once a source of joy, had become a minefield of potential heartbreak. Every attempt at starting anew was met with the cold reality of my situation. The judgment of others was a constant companion, a reminder of the society's unforgiving nature. I was branded, marked by my mistakes, and no matter how hard I tried to move on, the past always seemed to catch up with me. In the silence of my apartment, the weight of my choices bore down on me. The contrast between my life and my husband's recovery was a bitter pill to swallow. He had moved on, healed by the passage of time and the support of friends. I, on the other hand, was stuck in a limbo of my own making, unable to escape the consequences of that fateful night. The realization that I had lost not just my husband but myself in the process was devastating. The person I once was seemed like a stranger, a reminder of a life filled with promise that was now out of reach. The journey to reclaim some sense of self, to find redemption in the wreckage of my past, was daunting. But it was a journey I had to undertake, not for anyone else, but for myself. The road to recovery was long, and the outcome uncertain, but the first step was acknowledging the depth of my fall and the possibility of rising again. Just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, the universe proved me wrong. Jenna was back, like a bad sequel to a movie you wish you'd never watched. Her message was clear. Pay up, or the world gets an encore of my worst moment. But this time, something in me snapped. What more did I have to lose? My reputation was in shreds, my personal life a disaster. So I told her no. I refused to be blackmailed any longer. Big mistake. The videos hit the internet faster than a wildfire, each share, each view. Another twist of the knife. My phone exploded with notifications, a relentless reminder of my fall from grace. Friends, family, strangers, it didn't matter. The judgment was unanimous, and it was brutal. Work was no refuge. The whispers, the stares, the outright disdain, it was too much. My boss called me into his office, his face a mask of professional regret. "I'm sorry," he said, "but we have to let you go." The reasons were vague, cloaked in corporate speak, but the message was clear. I was too much of a liability, a scandal they couldn't afford to be associated with. So, just like that, I was jobless, another casualty of my own making. The isolation was suffocating. Friends who hadn't already deserted me now did, unable to associate with the pariah I'd become. My family was supportive, but their attempts at comfort felt like band-aids on a gaping wound. Depression became my constant companion, whispering sweet nothings about my worthlessness, my failure. Happiness seemed like a concept designed for others, a club to which I no longer belonged. And then, the coup de grace. My husband, now my ex, published a book. Overcoming Betrayal, hit the shelves and skyrocketed to the top of the charts. It was everywhere. Interviews, talk shows, glowing reviews. Each mention was a reminder of the chasm between us, of the life and love I'd squandered. His success was the final nail in the coffin of our shared past. He had moved on, turned our tragedy into his triumph, while I remained trapped in the purgatory of my mistakes. Sitting alone in my dimly lit apartment, the contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. He had risen from the ashes of our marriage, a phoenix reborn, while I lingered in the shadows, a ghost of the woman I once was. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to find myself, I had lost everything that mattered. My choices, my actions, had led me here, to this moment of stark realization. The road ahead seemed bleak, a never-ending tunnel with no light in sight. Yet, in the depths of despair, a flicker of defiance sparked within me. Was I going to let this be the end of my story? A tale of caution, of loss and defeat? The thought was unbearable. With nothing left to lose, I realized I had everything to gain. Rebuilding my life wouldn't be easy, but perhaps, in the wreckage of my past, I could find the foundation for something new, something true. It was a slim hope, a fragile seed in the barren landscape of my life. But it was mine, and in that moment, it was enough. Flipping through channels, I stumbled upon him. larger than life on the screen, speaking with a calm I barely recognize. He was discussing his book, his journey of overcoming betrayal. His words, so measured and insightful, seemed to pierce through the haze of my existence. It was in that moment, watching him articulate his pain and recovery, that the full weight of what I had done settled on my shoulders. He had seen through me, understood the depth of my betrayal, and had found a way to transform it into a beacon for others. I was both proud and devastated. Driven by a surge of desperation, I decided to reach out to him one last time. Maybe there was a sliver of hope for forgiveness, for some form of closure that could ease the aching void between us. I penned a letter, pouring every ounce of my regret and longing into the words, and sent it through a friend, our last remaining link. Days passed in silence, each one heavier than the last, until the message finally came. Not in his handwriting, not in his voice, but through the cold, digital text from our mutual friend. He said, "There's nothing left to say." Those 6 words felt like a door slamming shut, the final echo of a love that once filled my life with warmth and possibility. The realization that I was truly alone, that my actions had irrevocably severed the bond with the one person who had once loved me unconditionally, was crushing. I looked around the empty apartment, its walls bearing witness to my unraveling. This place, devoid of memories or warmth, was a stark testament to my fall from grace. The loneliness was palpable, a constant companion that reminded me of the cost of my choices. As I sat amidst the remnants of my former life, the full extent of my loss dawned on me. My future, once bright with promise and shared dreams, was now a barren landscape, shaped by the choices of my past. There was no going back, no words that could bridge the chasm I had created. The realization that there was no hope for reconciliation, no chance for redemption, settled in with a finality that took my breath away. In that moment of profound solitude, I understood the true cost of my actions. It wasn't just the loss of my marriage, or the public scandal, or even the career I had painstakingly built. It was the loss of myself, the person I had been before the choices that led me here. I had traded everything for a moment of escape, and the price was my very soul. The journey from here was uncertain, a path unmarked and daunting. But it was mine to take. In the depths of despair, I found a flicker of resolve, a stubborn refusal to be defined by my worst moments. The road to redemption was long, perhaps endless, but it was the only way forward. As the chapter of my life with him closed, a new one awaited, written not with the expectation of forgiveness or redemption from others, but with the hope of finding them within myself. It was a small hope, fragile and uncertain, but it was all I had. And in the silence of my empty apartment, it was enough to light the first step of a long journey